Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Baldwin Sports Media NFL podcast coming to you after what was certainly an eventful week and a controversial week, to say the very least, across the National Football League. And of course, we will be diving right into them right after we finish the introduction, which is as simple as me saying thank you very much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You are listening to this on YouTube. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, do everything that you need to do to make sure that you keep up to date with everything that's going on with this podcast. Don't forget to also follow us on our social medias. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on Instagram and TikTok, and at MRB Sports Media on Twitter. So feel free to give us a follow there. If you are new, feel free to do them. And if you are a returning listener, then as always, thank you so much for continuing to make me just that small part of your week. And with that, let's get into it. So we are coming to you at the end of week 16 of the 2025 NFL season. I had to think there for a second. That was far too many numbers in a row for my brain to comprehend. And the playoff picture has started to take a little bit more shape. The number of teams have qualified, in the AFC, the Broncos, the Patriots, the Jaguars, the Chargers, and the Bills have clinched their spots, seedings to be determined, and whatever. And in the NFC, we have the Seahawks, the Bears, the Eagles, the 49ers, and the Rams. And again, seedings working out as we go along. Now, the playoff picture has always been a bit weird and a bit complicated because, as we look at it, we have, again, in the NFC, just because I have them up right now, we have the number one. If the playoffs were to finish today, we have the number one, the number two, the number three, the number five, and the number six have their spots secured. But where's the number four? Now that's because in number four in the NFC, we're waiting for the NFC South to work out their division winner, whoever that's going to be. And in the AFC North, we're waiting for in the AFC, we're waiting for the AFC North to determine their winner, and then that gets slotted into the fourth spot. Now, this is something I brought up last year because we always have the rules, or it's been a discussion for the past couple of years, rather, whether or not it is quote unquote fair that a team that finishes with a better record has to go on the road in the first round of the playoffs because the division winners get the priority, as we know. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, all division winners, and then number one team, the best of the four division winners, gets the first round bye, as it has been for a couple of years. I want to take that debate a little bit further, if I may. I think we need to get rid of divisions entirely. Because this would be it would be one very easy way to get rid of this whole debate of teams going on the road. Just have it, just have it 1 through 7. Again, you give the first team the bye, but then, just 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5, as it would be. But get rid of divisions and just have it as the best 7 records in the conference. I can understand why divisions were made and why they have been a thing historically. It's because of geography. And in the olden days, it would have made sense because with travel or whatever, you don't want to be sending your team all the way across the country X amount of times a year. You want to limit travel to some stage. So you want to have some games, arguably the majority of your games, held within a close proximity so it saves on travel and everything. But in the modern day, with travel and sports science the way it is, I don't think it's that big of a deal as it once was. Keeping teams together in divisions worked great in the days when, they were going on trains, for instance. So, you want to keep things close. But now, the way things are going, especially if we're expanding travel to include international games and whatever, why bother with this charade that it's about proximities, it's about rivalries and everything like that? You can still get the best of both worlds if you get rid of divisions. So what I'm proposing is, again, we just get rid of divisions. It also would mean a very radical change in the schedule structure. I get that. But I think it would work. And it would go somewhat similar to what we have in college. So let's take the AFC, for instance. 16 teams. Boom. There's your schedule right there. You play one team home, you play one team away. You're not playing a team twice. It's just one team you're playing away, one team you're playing at home, and then next year you alternate around. So for the Jaguars, say we'll go through. We'll start with their division. They play Houston away, they play Indianapolis at home, and they play Tennessee away. Baltimore at home, Pittsburgh away, Cleveland at home, Cincinnati away, so on and so forth. You basically just alternate like that. That gives you 15 games against the other teams in your conference. And again, it would be structured so you'd have 8 home games one season within the conference, 8 home games one year, and then 7 away games, and then you flip it, and you get 7 home games and 8 home games within the conference the next year. A bit like we see now with teams getting in the 17-game schedule, 9 home regular season games or 8 regular season home games because of the oddness of the schedule. What happens then? I don't know how you'd want to do it. You can there are 2 ways you could then go about it, but I propose to make it up to 17 games. And this would be sticking on a 17-game schedule. It does get a little bit more confusing when we get to 18 games, but we can work that out. Actually, I've got a solution to that. It's literally just coming to my head, but we'll get to that. But 17 games, you play across the conference, or inter-conference, I believe. Yeah, inter-conference. You play the team that matches you and the team that goes opposite you in the table. So if you finish first in your division, in your conference, you play the team that finishes first in the other conference. So if you come in first in the AFC, you then play the team that comes first in the NFC, and you play the team that comes bottom. If you finish second, you play the team that finishes second, and you play the team that finishes 16th, so on and so forth. That's how you do it with 17 games. And then if you want to extrapolate it to 18 games, by all means, have a double header against the team that, again, matches you within the conference. So first plays 16, 2 plays 15, so on and so forth. That's the team you play in a double header. I just think that makes it a whole lot more easier to manage, and also to get a fairer schedule for most teams. How many times do we complain, or do we see, teams say, oh, they only got this because they're in a weak division? The New England Patriots dynasty. The only reason or a large part of the reason they were able to have that dynasty was because they won the division so many years. That's because they had the, at the time, dysfunctional Dolphins, the, at the time, and still, dysfunctional Jets, and the, at the time, dysfunctional Bills. That made it so much more easier for the Patriots to just pick up 6 wins, 5 or 6 wins every single year. Take that away, all of a sudden they get, the other dysfunctional teams across the conference, but they also get the tough teams as well. They have to go and play. I'll take it during the dynasty days. There would have been years they would have had to have avoided the Ray Lewis Baltimore Ravens, for instance, or the Ben Roethlisberger Pittsburgh Steelers, or the Phillip Rivers Chargers, or the Peyton Manning Colts, rather. There would have been years they would have been able to avoid them. But then you've got to play these teams every single time. There's no ducking any of the hard teams. And at the same time, you don't get to beat up twice on the dysfunctional teams. I just think that's a way fair. Again, it also means we don't have if you want to flip it the other way, the unfairness of a team having to be in a completely stacked division. Look at what the NFC West has looked like this year. 3 teams already on 11 wins. Like, would that be the same if they didn't have the luxury of having to play the Arizona Cardinals twice a year and just pick up? Okay, that's 2 easy wins for the Rams, 2 easy wins for the Seahawks, 2 easy wins for the 49ers. Would the schedule look a bit more different if they take away that one game against the Cardinals and they then have to go and play? For the sake of argument, I don't know what the schedules work like, but if the 49ers had to play another game against the Eagles rather than that second game against the Cardinals, that will be a lot more challenging for it, and it will be a lot fairer indication of how things land within the conference. Why should we be stuck to say, oh, this is the best team in the conference when you didn't play everyone within the conference? It just doesn't make sense to me. So I think that would be one easy way to get around the debate of, is it fair that a division winner has to, or always gets to host even if they've got a worse record? Gets rid of that argument for a start, but that also gives us a little fairer indication of who really is the best within the conference. And then you just stack it 1 to 7. That's the best record within the conference. I just think that would be a great way to go about it. And again, this is now 2025, approaching 2026. I don't think we can use the old arguments of logistics to have it. And I heard some people say, because I did mention this on social media the other day, and someone said, oh no, division rivalries matter. You can still have the rivalries. The Steelers will still play the Ravens once a year. I'm just going to spit out some. The Eagles will still play the Cowboys once a year. It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen twice. And it also means it's that slightly bit more special because you're only playing once a year. It's a much more of a grander event because you're only doing it once. It's not, oh, we're playing them in week 5 and then we're also playing them in week 17. So you get whatever. It will also make it easier for tiebreakers as well because there's no chance of splitting tiebreakers. So let me know what you think. Do you think that would be a much better way to structure the NFL standings, the seedings, the playoffs, everything like that? And with that, we move on to our second subject of the week. And this one involves the most obvious and glaring and probably the biggest, I would say probably the biggest non-actual action. Probably, actually, that's probably a bad phrase given what we're about to talk about. Bit of news that's emerged over the course of the weekend. And that is, of course, the altercation between Steelers wide receiver DK Metcalf and a Detroit Lions fan during the game. Now, for those who haven't seen, I can't imagine there being that many who haven't seen at the moment. Basically, DK Metcalf was involved in an altercation. It was only really mentioned because it happened to be picked up by one of the TV cameras. Whoever was in charge of that camera, great find of being able to spot out the incident. Otherwise, well, I suppose it would have come out in the days of social media, but it meant we were able to get instant, coverage of it. Because it's pretty clear. But anyway, involved in an altercation with a fan. I'm not going to go into the whole he said, she said, this is whatever. But basically, DK Metcalf gets an argument with a fan, pulls on his wig, hair, and then sort of pushes him away, punches. I don't know, but you've seen the footage, but that's basically the long short of it. Now, what I want to talk about is the suspension of 2 games, which honestly, when I first saw the incident, I figured, okay, he's definitely being suspended. I think, whether there was an argument, maybe would he be able to get away with just a fine, depending on, how quickly the investigation was meant to come out, whatever. I think a suspension is probably fair. My only thing is whether or not this is a precedent being set of it only being 2 games, and that decision has been upheld. He did appeal, but it's been upheld, so it will stand at 2 games. I want to know, was this standard as a 2-game suspension, or was this an until the end of the regular season suspension? Because the only comparison I can think of, and I know it's not a direct comparison, but I think back to the Myles Garrett incident with Mason Rudolph all those years ago. And when the incident happened, when Myles Garrett, swung his helmet, or swung Mason Rudolph's helmet rather at Rudolph, he was suspended for the rest of the regular season, which happened to be, I think it was about 6 games-ish at the time. I want to know, again, was this a rest of the regular season suspension, or was this a 2-game suspension? Because, Lord forbid something like this happens again between a player and a fan. What is the precedent that has been set? Is it you are suspended until the end of the regular season, regardless of what week it happens? If it happens in week 10, then you're out for 8 weeks, say. No, it's basically you're done for the year. Or is this a 2-game suspension if you get into an altercation with a fan? So, if you get into something like this happens in week 3, are you then just out for week 4 or 5? Again, I don't think it really matters. I don't think any player in that situation, depending on what has been said and what goes through their mind and whatever, again, I'm not going to get into the details of what was or wasn't said. But in their mind, are they thinking, okay, this is going to cost me 2 games, or this is going to cost me until the end of the regular season? That's just one thing I do want to know, and I'm sure will come out in the coming days, of just what this was based on and what the precedent is going to be moving forward. I will say the interesting scenario that has come out of it is the DK Metcalf could be in for a lot more trouble than he probably bargained for. Because not only has he been suspended 2 games, not only does he miss out on paychecks, not only does he potentially miss out on bonuses, because who knows if he had touchdown bonuses if he scores a certain number of touchdowns or receiving yard or receptions. If he was 1 or 2 catches away from getting a $500,000 bonus, say, he just forfeited those. But the news obviously coming out that may have forfeited a bunch of guaranteed money from his contract, because it was written into his contract that if he does anything naughty, detrimental to the team, I can't remember the exact wording, that the team has the right to then forfeit basically whatever is left of his guarantee, or a large chunk of his guaranteed money, which was in the range of about $45 million. Now, the way DK Metcalf is, or his age rather, and if his production carries on, then I don't see any reason why the Steelers won't be able to just, keep hold of him and make him earn that money back, another way. But it's just going to be very interesting to see if, not to say that DK Metcalf hasn't been good this season, he's just not been, I think, what the Steelers would have wanted. Part of that would have been down to the offense that's been run and the struggles that's been had with Aaron Rodgers in the offense and the growing pains that's been going on. But when you invested the amount that the Pittsburgh Steelers did, I think he's had a slightly underwhelming season. I think you could have got as much, if not more, maybe of the production with George Pickens. If you didn't have DK Metcalf, you just kept Pickens as the number one and didn't get Metcalf, I think it would have been about the same. Personally, you would have had to have dealt with a headache, but cross that bridge when you come to it ever. But if DK Metcalf continues to play well, I think he'll be able to make that money back elsewhere. So not necessarily the biggest concern, but certainly something he may need to be worried about moving forward if he's one of these players that concerns more about money than anything else. And with that, we move on to our roundup section of the week. Again, it's going to start getting a little bit smaller as we move on, just because there's not as much to talk about across the league. Do I really care about the Kansas City Chiefs and the Titans playing in a game where both teams have been eliminated? No, not really. So let's go with it. But I think we should probably start with the 2 confusing endings of the week. The Seahawks over the Rams, massive game, potentially deciding the number 1 seed in the NFC, but very weird ending. I think a great example of the play to the whistle mentality that I know a lot of coaches like to instill. The play's not over till it's over. Incredibly weird ending with was a backwards pass, however, but it's always just there. You never know. Just play through. You never know what's going to happen. It's not going to hurt. And in this case, it really did help. The Seahawks managed to win that game. Just incredible. Incredible ending, incredible scenario. How many people knew that rule or knew what was going on? I imagine very few, but luckily the referees did, and that is all that matters. And now we move on to this is meant to be a quick roundup, but obviously the ending of the Steelers-Lions game. I don't want to get into the pass interferences. You can argue that until the cows come home, whether or not you think it was offensive pass interference or not on the final couple of plays. What I take issue with was the way the referees announced the play. The final play with the throw from Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown that gets to the goal line. He's then pushed back, then he laterals it to Jared Goff, who goes in for the score. Again, whether or not you want to argue was offensive pass interference somewhere in the thing, whatever. My issue with that is, why was the play not called dead for lack of forward progress when Amon-Ra St. Brown is being pushed back? That should have been the end of the play, no whistle there. But beyond that, the call by the referee at the end, when he started off by saying, the call on the field is a touchdown. I get why they did it, because fine, if you don't think that forward progress was stopped and the lateral was legal and whatever, fine, go for it. But the way that it was so confusing I'm pretty sure everyone watching, when they heard the ruling on the field is a touchdown, and then he went into the thing of, offensive pass interference. Then the explanation of, this is this would have extended that, this wouldn't have extended the half or whatever. The game is over. There is no touchdown. I think that could have been handled so much easier because the emotions from everyone going through, and there's even footage emerging of Detroit Lions fans basically celebrating when they say offense, the ruling on the field is a touchdown, the ruling with, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the pass interference, then they say that's the end of the game. They should have made it clearer a lot sooner that this touchdown is not going to count. I think just to clear up any confusion, because even I did. As soon as he said the game is over, I had in my mind, wait, are they going to count this? And then he said there is no touchdown. But in amongst the noise of everything that was going on in full field, there are probably some Detroit Lions fans that left the stadium thinking that they won. Would have fact out, when Dan Campbell's in his press conference says, oh, we lost, and they get like notification on their phone, final score and whatever. But they would have left the stadium thinking that they won. Just so confusing. I think that ending, regardless of the ruling and what you agree with the rules, the way it was announced could have been handled so much better, I think, from the refereeing standpoint. Moving on, we go to the Sunday Night Football, the big game of the week, the Patriots and the Ravens, a game that had big implications across the AFC playoff picture and the seedings and the standings or whatever, especially after the Jaguars beat the Broncos, giving the Patriots the chance to claim that AFC top spot. I think huge, or at least give them a better chance of claiming that top seed. Moving forward, just huge game. Again, I don't want to talk about refereeing every single week, and I will just start with this before I get to the bigger point. The missed pass interference call, where the player is literally being dragged down before the ball gets to him, how that was missed by the NFL officials, by the officials on the field, for starters, and then this goes back to my whole thing of make everything reviewable, because at least in that point, New York can come in and say, no, that was definitely pass interference. What the hell are you doing? Give them the ball, spot foul, give the Patriots the ball down there. Didn't matter in the end, but if the Ravens go on and win that game, that is going to be a huge talking point for everything moving forward, but just major thing. But glad the Patriots did win, because it erased that. But I think that's a pretty big statement for the Patriots. And I think when you get to around this time, you are looking for statement wins. And the fact they were able to go into Baltimore in that situation, yes, they didn't have to deal with Lamar Jackson for a large part of it, but Snoop Huntley has showed himself that he is no scrub when it comes to running the Ravens offense. It's not like the major downshift that we've seen from the Chiefs with having to go from Mahomes to Gardner Minshew, for instance. He can run that offense pretty damn well. But to go in and beat the Ravens in that situation on the road, this close to playoff time, is going to be a huge mental factor. That if the Ravens do make it, they're behind the 8 ball now for making it, but if they do make it, that's going to give them so much confidence that they can, because they're going to have to, more than likely have to host them. That's going to give the Patriots so much confidence going into that game, potential game, if they get that far. And finally, just an offside bit, because I do want to just touch briefly on what's happening on Christmas Day and just how unfortunate the NFL has come with the games they've got for Christmas Day. 1 o'clock game is the Cowboys and the Commanders, both of whom are eliminated from the playoffs. One of them is down there starting quarterback. Then we have the Detroit Lions and Minnesota Vikings at 4:30. Detroit Lions on the outside looking in for a playoff spot against the Minnesota Vikings, who are down to, I do not know what number quarterback they are at this point, but eliminated from the playoffs, and just a bit of a mess. And the Denver Broncos, fine, we get one good team, and the Kansas City Chiefs, who are now down to their 3rd-string quarterback. Just severe unluckiness from the NFL. I think it will be very interesting to see what numbers those games do. I think it will be a pretty good indication of the star power. Like, okay, how big are the Cowboys really? Because we get them on Thanksgiving, and they've sometimes given us good results, sometimes given us bad, but it's at that stage of the season where, on Thanksgiving, where at least one of the teams has a chance to compete. But now you look at it, Cowboys out around that 1 o'clock window. Are people really going to want to tune in for that? Same with Lions, Vikings doesn't quite have the gravitas that it probably was meant to do when they scheduled it. And the Chiefs without Patrick Mahomes, what kind of draw is that going to do? I think the numbers on these games are going to be very, very interesting to see. And finally, before we wrap up, my one final point, and it does evolve around the Christmas season, which, I'm recording this on the 23rd. You'll be listening to this on the 24th. It involves around Christmas, and one of the best promotional giveaways I have seen for some time. And it comes from the Anaheim Ducks, who have given away, in one of their most recent games, Wild Wing Nutcrackers. Everyone knows the Nutcrackers. You see them around this time from the ballet, the Nutcracker, and the sort of wooden look, the classic Nutcracker look that they have. But they incorporated their mascot Wild Wing into it, which is a brilliant combination just of itself, just with Wild Wing's appearance. Wild Wing. He's the one that wears the old school Goldie mask as a face, but because he has the beak, it's just an incredible look. But somewhat, I don't know if it was the Ducks themselves, but I saw it come across social media, and they called it Nutquackers. Perfect. 10 out of 10. Whoever was in charge of the marketing, the creation, the naming, everyone who's involved on that project gets a 10 out of 10, gets an 11 out of 10 for that. Just absolutely perfect from start to finish. Brilliant, and I kind of wish I had one just to say this is my Nutquacker. Absolutely fantastic. And with that, that is it for this show. I want to thank you very much for listening. And I suppose it's only really fitting for me to say, I'll do the as well. Follow us on our social medias at Bolton Sports Media on Instagram and TikTok, at MRB Sports Media on Twitter. Like, subscribe, comment, do whatever it is that you need to do. But I suppose I best really end the show in one way, and that's to thank you very much for listening, but also, because it is this time of year, wish you a very Merry Christmas or whatever it is that you celebrate at this time of year. If you're not a person that celebrates Christmas, hope you just have a great time and whatever. And just as I always say, take care and stay safe. And with a bit of luck, hopefully, again, scheduling, working around with the new year and whatever goes on with the NFL this week, I'll be able to come back and talk to you plenty more next week. But as always, take care, stay safe, and Merry Christmas.